Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Smith. I'm Group Managing Director of People to People here in Australia and Frog Recruitment in New Zealand. So welcome to the last of our webinars for 2020. It's been a challenging year, but our Leadership and Talent webinar series has been a change that we'll certainly be sticking with indefinitely, I think. So today's session is titled Market Update, Where To for Career Seekers in 21. So it's derived from our P2P post. Now, that's an annual publication from the P2P team in Australia and the Frog team in New Zealand, and it contains employment, jobs and salary data throughout Australia. And today we'll be covering just a small part of its 60 pages. So discussing some important trends and highlighting parts that we've thought would be of interest to you. And we don't normally provide this freely to the market, but as attendees to today's webinar, we'll be providing a free copy to you. There will be a link in the chat section that you can see on your screen, but we'll also be emailing you a copy of the P2P post as well, so you'll get that in your inbox. So the information we'll be sharing with you today comes from a variety of sources. They include obviously the Australian Bureau of Statistics, NZ Stats, Indeed and Seek. We've also summarised data from over 3,000 interviews that we've done this year, specifically the salary data that's in the P2P post. We won't cover off specific salaries today so much, but if you do have questions about the content or maybe around a specific salary, feel free to ask those questions in the chat section as well. We've also conducted 3 SNAP surveys during 2020, and some of you may have actually participated in those surveys, and this has given us some really interesting trend data specifically around COVID. So today's format will be a series of conversations with people to people and Frog recruitment specialists throughout Australia and New Zealand. So let me just go through or introduce you briefly to the team that will be speaking with us today. Firstly, we have Kirsty from the Frog recruitment team in Auckland. She will be updating us on the New Zealand jobs market and Kiwi trends identified in the post. Then we'll be crossing the Nullarbor, and 5 hours really. There's a 5-hour time difference between Auckland and Perth, to Kim Padmore, a director in Western Australia, and she'll be updating us on that particular market and exploring flexible working trends that appear in the post as well. Amy Burton will be joining us from Melbourne. She'll give us a Victorian perspective and speaking about tips on burnout and working from home. So there's plenty of real life experience, I think, for the Victorians there. We'll then catch up with Kirsten Garrett from our Sydney accounting team. Kirsten will be taking a look at the New South Wales market with specific reference to the accounting specialisation. Jamie Taylor from our Parramatta and Western Sydney team will then look at the business support and supply chain specialisations. And finally, but not least, Anthony DeMarco will be giving us an in-depth look at the legal sector throughout Australia. So that's the format. As I said, if you have any comments, and I can see that there's a few people online making comments already, so welcome everybody. Please pop them there. We can see them real time and we'll get to them during the conversations that we're having with the team. But let's get started first with Kirsty from our Frog team. So Kirsty Hennigan was born and raised in Manchester, and you'll certainly hear that in a second. And Kirsty ventured to New Zealand for a far-flung challenge about 2 years ago, and she hasn't actually gone back. So she specialises in permanent, temporary and contract business and legal support in our Auckland team. And she's successfully built an impressive network of candidates at all levels. And she won our 2020 Stride Candidate Care Award for People to People. So please join me now in welcoming Kirsty to the webinar. Good afternoon, Kirsty. I can see that you've got the New Zealand Top Dog banner behind you, and I'm wearing the Frog orange. I don't know if you've noticed.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I'm wearing the Frog green.
Oh, excellent, good. So I'll pass it over to you, Kirsty, to talk through the overview of the New Zealand market.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, Brill. So in terms of the New Zealand job market, so on this page that you can see on page 3 on the right-hand side, you can see that we were on quite a steady growth in terms of how many job vacancies that we were seeing on Seek. And then obviously come COVID, we saw a drastic decrease. And obviously, I think especially the way that everything was perceived across the media, it was almost the end of the world. Everything was being put on hold. So we did see that kind of drop within vacancies that were coming through. So the main areas that were affected was sales, business services, and hospitality. So they're the ones that had the most kind of dramatic decrease within roles in that kind of initial hit. In terms of, I'm just going to go on to the next slide, Remy, on page 6. In terms of our wage price index, so it's quite an interesting one because last year when we did our P2P post, we were going out and visiting clients and saying, oh, we're at an all-time low with the unemployment rate, and we're going to see this really kind of dramatic increase in terms of our salary growth. And we started seeing that change at the start of the year. And then COVID's happened, so I think it's pushed us back in New Zealand a little bit. So we were on that steady kind of increase of around about 2%. And that was just steady with our CPI, basically. And we did think that we were going to get that bit of a bump. And yeah, we did see that. And I think that comes from the minimum wage increase in New Zealand, as well as you can see, it is a little bit like zoomed out as such, but within the public sector, we do have a growth of about 3.2%. Wow. And I think that comes down to the fact that obviously they were trying to keep up with the private sector, and they had made them initial kind of commitments pre-COVID, which they had to stick to. And we also saw an increase in the healthcare sector, which happened during the lockdown period, as well as the education sector. So teachers got a pay rise last year. So I think that's where we've seen that 3.2% growth. But also, it obviously is quite a stable market at the moment. So I do know that a lot of people are looking to get into the public sector now and make their way over, just because they are looking for that stability at the moment. In terms of the New Zealand market, so Remy, you can go to the page 22 or 23, whichever one it is. So in terms of the New Zealand market, so as I mentioned last year, we were at an all-time low. So I think it got to about 3.6% our unemployment rate in New Zealand. And then when we brought out our P2P post, we were at about 4.2%. The unemployment rate is now around about 5.3%, which isn't as bad as what we initially thought, because I think predictions initially were around about 10%. So I do think that kind of New Zealand go fast, go hard has definitely made a positive impact on our market. And I do think that we are definitely seeing market confidence. So initially we, definitely for us as well, Mark, we were, I think what kept us afloat was being on that government panel and supplying to government, because there was a lot of government jobs coming through, and they were a lot of newly created roles as well because of COVID. So there was a lot of project positions on that temp and contract basis. But we are actually starting to see quite a few permanent roles coming through now as well. So I think the interesting thing is that even though there is that abundance of candidates in the market, which I don't think is quite as drastic as we initially thought, there is still a skill shortage. So we are still finding it quite difficult to find some of them people who are from like the technical space, or just the roles that we were finding hard pre-COVID, they are still hard post-COVID. So I know that within like the sales industry, project managers, estimators, in your construction industry, we are still having a bit of a skill shortage. And I don't think it helps the fact that a lot of our candidates used to come from overseas, and obviously the borders are now shut. So I do think it's going to be quite interesting for next year, just to wait and see what happens in the market, what happens with the unemployment rate, what happens with the salaries, and where we are actually going to see that growth in positions as well. But yeah, I think
okay, great. So I mean, this is not a very scientific question for you, but what's the mood like? How is confidence, business confidence? Does it feel better than it has been?
Yes, definitely. So it's been really interesting meeting with clients actually, because one of the things that a lot of people have been saying was obviously that initial hit with COVID, they saw basically profit drop right off and they went straight under. And then they've actually come back stronger. So they've come back, they've made up the loss that they made during COVID, and they are actually going into profit lines now as well. So people that did maybe go hard and fast, letting staff go or reducing salaries, a lot of places are taking on the wage subsidy. A lot of places paid back the wage subsidy, and a lot of places have also repaid their staff the money that they were reduced during that time.
The big accounting firms did that recently, didn't they? That was
yes, definitely. So it's, so it's definitely more of a positive anyway. So I do think that we've got that market confidence coming back.
Before I let you go, what about regionally? So I know our offices are in Wellington and Auckland.
Yeah.
Is there differences, say South Island, North Island, outside of Auckland Metro? Do you have any comments you'd like to make there?
I probably wouldn't know too much, to be honest. So we do work in Auckland and in Wellington, but I'm not too sure what's going on across on the South Island. So I'm probably not the best person to ask that one, sorry.
Excellent. All right, let's just check to see if there's any questions that have come through so far. There's lots of people saying thanks for the invite. That's cool. None that are specifically for New Zealand right now, but if they do pop through, then we'll come straight back to you. So thank you very much, Kirsty. Now let's go across the Nullarbor to Perth and Kim Padmore. Now, Kim Padmore started her career with in recruitment with People to People back in 2010, but then she left me. She then went over to London, and we recruited for a wide range of law firms in London, and she returned to People to People in 2015. After experiencing life in the UK, I think it was a little bit later than that actually, and she has established the Perth office and has developed a successful legal support recruitment business there, amongst leading the other specialisations as well. Good afternoon, Kim. Welcome to the webinar. So, Kim, you are going to take us through the WA market and then talk specifically through some of these flexible working arrangements and the trends that came from our SNAP survey in the P2P post as well. So can you describe the WA market for us at the moment?
Yeah, so we're actually in a very good place in WA here at the moment. So there is a lot of confidence in the market. WA was actually the only state in Australia that has seen positive growth in our domestic economy from 2019 to 2020. That's largely due to our mining resources sector that's kept really steady throughout the pandemic, which has also trickled on and created work in other sectors for us as well. I think what's also put WA in a good position is our the WA recovery plan was rolled out very quickly. So we've got a $5.5 billion recovery plan to create more jobs and boost our economy. So there's huge infrastructure projects happening here at the moment, lots of construction similar to what Kirsty was saying in New Zealand. So creating huge talent shortages in that sector as well. And there's government grants for home building as well. So that's a big area for us and much needed with, less migration happening here and reduced hours and salaries for a lot of people. So yeah, that's really put us into a good spot. And in terms of recruitment at the moment, for the last 2 months now, there has been quite a lot of growth, especially in the legal sector that I recruit in. So there's a bit more activity happening. On to the next page here that you can see around unemployment rate. So as of July 2020, we were sitting at an 8.3% unemployment rate, which was very high. This has now dropped and we're sitting at 6.4% unemployment. So it's come down quite a lot. The workforce is in WA. So as you can see the table next to the graph here, so it's almost an even split between businesses that are still operating from home compared to those that are working from a mix of home and office. In terms of staffing changes since the pandemic for WA, the biggest thing that we've seen has been reduced hours, which you can see also reflected in these stats. So 41% of businesses in WA experience that. And certainly for the legal sector, we've seen that here in WA as well. So majority of firms did experience that. And most firms now seem to be operating back to full hours or close to. So we're definitely heading in the right direction, and there's projected growth within WA for the next few months.
Okay, and yep, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just going to ask her, so around that working from home, what are the candidates' expectations around flexibility then?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a huge thing, and obviously organisations have had to pivot quite quickly. And Remy, if you want to go on to the next page with the impacts of flexible working, we've got some stats here as well. So we're definitely seeing a lot of businesses had to have staff working from home straight away. So that's continued on, and candidates are saying that to us in their interviews. So when they're registering with us and when we're talking to them about what's important to them in their next roles, majority of candidates are saying they want to continue to have that flexibility. And I think that's going to be really hard to take away from a lot of people now that have gotten used to working from home, or adjusting to different hours and different patterns. So it's definitely a trend that candidates want that moving forward.
I thought it was interesting, that stat that you can see right at the top of the page there. The pandemic workday is 48 minutes longer and has more meetings.
Yeah. But then if you look further down, the actual time spent in meetings has decreased. So, people are getting more stuff done, and it's more short and sharp when you're online.
Okay, excellent, good. And so what flexibility are you seeing from clients then? What are they offering, and how is that affecting candidates in their job search?
Yeah, so with employers that have had staff working from home, so a lot of them are still working on a bit of a mix. So majority of the clients that we're working with at the moment have their staff working a couple of days from home a week. They're usually pre-arranged agreements so that the businesses can plan around those. So they'll have set, 1 to 2 days. And that's really affecting candidates with their search as well. So if they're already working flexibly, they're not going to want to move to a role where they don't have that, unless they're the type of people that don't want to work from home at all. So yeah, I think that will continue. We're also seeing there were a few organisations during the pandemic that actually didn't allow their staff to work from home at all. And that is actually proving to be a challenge for those organisations now to hire staff, because candidates are asking, how did you handle the pandemic? What happened with your staff? And they want to make sure they're going into an environment where their employers really prioritise the people.
Right, okay. Now we do have a question here from David. Given the large reduction in unemployment in WA, is this due to a reduction of international or interstate staff, or has the participation rate declined significantly?
Yeah, so I mean, that's actually been a challenge in some of our sectors, especially in mining. So a lot of the fly-in, fly-out workers will be based overseas or over east. So I think at the moment there's been a huge push for organisations to get people that are based in WA out to those types of positions. So that has been a challenge. So yeah, hopefully I've answered your question. I'm not too sure.
Excellent. All right. And I can see Michael has asked us here, have we got the same 2 pictures in every office? No, just happens that yes, Michael, most offices have the same 2 pictures. So you can see that my 2 are the same, that are right behind yours there, Kim. I think that's been, just to give you a bit of a background there, Michael, that is, they're related to our values. So that's the reason why we have them throughout our organisation. Okay, Kim, thank you very much for that. If anybody has any further questions for WA or for Kim, then please pop them in there. Okay, let's move on then. I was just checking the questions there. So let's move on then and have a quick chat to Amy Burton. So Amy Burton completed a Bachelor of Laws at the University of Chester in the UK, and she worked at an industry-leading law firm before kickstarting a career in recruitment. Since relocating to Melbourne in 2017, Amy has worked at People to People in our specialist legal team, and her remit is largely legal-based. However, she also regularly offers expertise and assistance within the technology and government sectors. Amy prides herself in partnering with firms that are progressive, constantly evolving, and ultimately enhancing the culture and diverse and inclusive teams. Good afternoon, Amy.
What a mouthful.
Yeah, it was. It was a long sentence there. I wonder.
Do apologise.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
No trouble at all. Now, you're going to talk to us a little bit about the Victorian market. So are there any trends in the Victorian market since the lockdown?
Yeah, we're definitely saw a spike within a day, or a couple of days, which was excellent. I think it was what we were all gunning for, and great to see that happening so quickly. We have seen a lot more permanent roles, more so than temp, which was quite surprising for us. We thought that temp would shoot up pretty quickly, but it seems that a lot of companies have remained either relatively stable or positively impacted. So with that, they're wanting to get perm staff on board pretty quickly. So that's excellent. I think that coming into the new year, we'll start to see temp ramp up. We're already seeing it even just this week. It's a couple of weeks before the festive season, and people are scrambling going, oh my gosh, I need to get a temp in for the holiday period, and that will go through the entire summer holidays as well. So employers will need to recruit quickly, and that's why we have those temps ready to go on that front. So that's good. And interestingly as well, we're finding that we're getting a lot more recruitment for the outer suburbs, more so than the CBD. And I think kind of logistically speaking, it's more that, these suburban offices can have, their workforce back in without too many issues, how many people you need to get in a lift, things like that, whilst some of the bigger companies that are based in the CBD are just struggling with the idea of how to get everyone in, or at least to get their team in as well. And then the last one I'll mention as well is that we have noticed a spike in management roles, and it's not just management in a particular industry, but across different areas. So we have a managing director role within manufacturing. We've got a transport manager role, P&C manager role. There's just like a huge mix, and they're all being offered on permanent basis as well, which is great.
So that's interesting. So are there any industries that are doing well?
Yes. So I'd say sales, business development, customer service, client service, those kind of positions we're seeing over and over again on a contract and permanent basis. So that's excellent. But we're seeing activity across all of our areas, actually, which is a really great sign for Victoria. I think we've been licking our wounds for a good 6 months or so, and good to see that Victoria is kind of getting back up and getting moving as well. So yeah, we've got positions across all, sales, customer service, accounting, lots of management roles as well. So lots going on, which is good.
Okay, good. So I can see on the screen there's some, we won't go through those unless you want to make any comment there, Amy, but that's just part of what's in the P2P post on the regional trends in Victoria, including unemployment rates and who's hiring and the like there as well. But I also wanted to talk to you specifically about burnout. So I know many people are suffering with burnout whilst working from home. Why do you think this is?
I think that what we've heard over and over the last few months is Zoom fatigue, or Teams fatigue, whatever you'd like to call it, and I'm sure I'm sure that exists, but I think it's a lot more than that as well. There's the expectation to be incredibly productive whilst the whole world's going through a public health crisis. So that can really take its toll, on your day-to-day, on your work life, and also your personal life as well. So it's kind of just ensuring that you're looking after yourself and others around you. So I think that the feeling of always being online as well is really getting to people, particularly those that might not have really experienced that kind of feeling before, where they do, the core 9 to 5 every day, 5 o'clock, switch off their laptop, go down the lift, jump on the tram or the train, and then they're home. They don't have to think about it, whilst, having their office, some people have had to have a desk in their office or in their living room. And I think always having your laptop there or your phone there, you do just kind of think, oh, I'll just check this, I'll just check that. And it's actually creating those boundaries there. So that's exactly the reason for burnout, I think.
Yeah. So have you got any tips for people for burnout?
Yeah, absolutely. So Remy, if you could just throw page 32 up. I'm not sure if people can see this too well, but as Mark said, you'll get a copy after. So there's a few tips here, and so you've got things like asking the right questions when people are giving you tasks and projects, just to make sure that you're using your time effectively, and you know exactly what you need to do. And with that, then prioritizing. Something that I started to do following a speaker that we had about a year ago called Kate Christie, was actually blocking out particular time in your day and saying, okay, this time is allocated to this task, and then actually having a goal that you kind of commit to the end. So it's like, okay, cool, done that goal, let's move on to the next thing. I find that if you block out your time and try and work kind of towards a goal, you'll keep yourself motivated as well. It's like, oh, yes, just done that. Awesome. Okay, what have I got next? And this ties into the last comment here, which is the say no, which I think if you're prioritizing well, and if someone can actually look in your diary and say, oh, yeah, Mark's doing X, Y, and Z from this time and this time. Actually, that looks really important. I won't bother with him with this task. And, you know, saying no can sound very direct, but, you know, all of these tie in quite nicely with each other. It's not necessarily saying no, but it's asking the right questions. It's then prioritizing effectively and just ensuring that you're communicating well with your team. Number 4 here, you've got take a break. I think the biggest thing here is, even if it's something as small as, you know, Mark every day goes out at 1 p.m. and has a coffee with his partner, or, you know, always goes for a walk at this time, then there's the expectation there. And if you've actually got time booked out in your diary where you've got plans and you're committed to them, you're going to have to walk away from your laptop. If you've got all these tentative plans, or, you know, you're not allocating time to be with like either your loved ones or, you know, just popping out yourself, then you're going to keep putting it off. So yeah, make sure you allocate time to log off and stick to your word. Turn off your phone, turn off your notifications, and this, you know, in being online, it's also take it to your personal life. A couple of months ago, I just felt so overwhelmed by social media and the news and getting notifications left, right, and center. You know, you get a notification from Teams and then LinkedIn and Outlook. There's just so much. So it's working out settings on like do not disturb, and it's limiting the amount of notifications that you're getting. You can put like time limits and things on it as well. So just looking at those type of things, so you're not your mood isn't always so affected by news coming in.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Now, I noticed Helen here says that most of the jobs becoming remote, etc. I think that's so. I wanted to sort of segue that her comment there into the question I've got here, which is some of the challenges. What are some of the challenges for staff that want to continue working from home, like post-COVID, once this ends?
Yeah, I think that we've definitely got a great opportunity here that we can leverage off in working from home and creating those flexible working arrangements. But it's also just to make sure that we don't go all one way, that we lose the team culture that we've all spent so much time in building over, you know, the months and years. And I think that there can be less interaction in like social events and things if people continue to work from home full time. So it's obviously taking that into consideration. You don't want to lose that kind of spontaneous camaraderie that you have in the team. I know even for our Melbourne team, you know, last year we'd all been sat down, you know, working away for hours, and I just went, right, let's do a plank challenge. How long can people hold a plank? And it was yeah, and it was something that was literally just a few minutes, but it just sparked us all. We were all laughing, and then, you know, it just keeps that camaraderie. And even the spontaneous moments in the kitchen when you're grabbing, you know, a coffee or something, or putting something away in the dishwasher, you get to chat to someone that you probably haven't spoken to all week. And to be calling someone on Teams or Zoom just really randomly might not be second nature to a lot of people. So could be losing that interaction for sure across the teams. And in that onboarding as well, there's been so many examples this year of people that have started a new position, which is awesome. But then working from home without actually going into the office and meeting people face to face has actually been really hard going. And, you know, we've all been there on our first day or first week or first month when we just go, oh, excuse me, I'm really sorry. Do you mind like just showing me X, Y, and Z again? Whilst it's so much more daunting to, you know, pick up the phone or to jump on a video call or something. So I think onboarding will definitely be a struggle if people want to stay at home for that time. Definitely for me, and I'm sure that others would agree, being in a team environment can really help with creativity, just coming up with different ideas. Someone might say something, you go, oh, yeah, that's just made me think of this. You know, how about this, this, and this? And just bouncing those ideas off really helps in a team environment, and you've got that buzz behind you. And the last one you'll see on page 33 is just the logistical nightmare that firms will have in not only just people working from home, but kind of creating that mix of people being back in the office. It's, you know, even South Australia saw it not so long ago when all of a sudden, you know, the whole state's in masks when they hadn't been used to wearing masks for, you know, the entire pandemic. So it's looking at, you know, wearing of masks, the social distancing measures and cleaning and so many things that for people to work out. So lots of different kind of red flags to look at in continuing to work from home in 2021.
Okay, great, fantastic. Right, yeah, let me just check. There's lots of comments coming through here. I can see. You can see that Dragon has said, what about your major do's and don'ts to make your CV shine? Dragon, we won't cover that today, but I would encourage you to join. We do a Facebook Live broadcast for 20 minutes, 12:30 Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time every Friday. So we'll have one tomorrow where we have a job hunting tip, and I will specifically cover that topic for you tomorrow if you join us on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn at 12:30 tomorrow afternoon. Okay, all right. So let's thank you, Amy.
Thanks.
It's very comprehensive, and if there's a whole bunch of information on flexible working and burnout, etc., in the P2P post, so hang online, and we'll give you a copy of that. Let's move on then, and now let's have a quick chat to Kirsten Garrett from our Sydney accounting team. So Kirsten, for those who don't know, is employee number 1 at People to People. She has over 20 years recruitment experience. She specialises in the accounting and finance sector, and she's got a broad range of commercial and professional services businesses at the time. And she's got far too many awards that she's won at P2P for me to mention here. But I will say that you've won client service, you've won candidate care on a couple of times over the years. But good afternoon, Kirsten. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Mark. And before I go into the things I was going to share, there are a few comments there that I'll try and address in the chat as we go through. But if anyone wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn, regardless of whether you're an accounting and finance professional, I'm happy to have a chat with you. But I think, first of all, it is worth noting that prior to COVID, New South Wales was the second best performing economy in Australia because we were benefiting from a diverse range of industries. We've got low interest rates, above average population growth, and a strong public sector investment. So that's positioned us reasonably well. However, when the COVID storm hit, the impact on hiring activity was very, very swift, very, very significant, with vacancies dropping by 75%. And while I don't have the GFC numbers, it felt like that back then. So it was pretty quick. There has been a slight month-on-month improvement over the last 6 months. So industries that have remained strong and dominant in New South Wales have included professional services, finance, insurance, property, healthcare and construction, as evident by the amount of cranes around our Sydney skyline. So hopefully that gives you just a broad stroke overview there, Mark, of and our audience today of what we're seeing in New South Wales.
Okay, what about the accounting sector specifically? And you may want to address Stanley's question here, which is, I thought a lot of accounting positions had been replaced by automation.
Yeah, thankfully for the accounting recruiters out there, no, they haven't. People still play a very vital role, and I guess the focus has shifted a bit. But if I take us back to the beginning of COVID, it became very evident that at the start and throughout COVID-19, cash flow forecasting and expense management has definitely been the business critical priorities for senior finance executives, weekly budgeting meetings, reforecasting meetings that will support decisions made more broadly across the business have dominated time. The other big standout in accounting and finance was there's been an increased workload due to the demands of JobKeeper, wage subsidies, tax relief, and office negotiations. So there's been some activity that has really increased the workload on accounting and finance professionals. And the big difference this year is these scenarios have played out without additional resources, and this has translated to longer hours, combined with, unfortunately, in many cases, salary cuts. So there's been a lot of stories in the market about hours and salaries being cut, but the workload has actually increased. So that then has contributed to some of those areas that Amy was talking about with burnout, etc. there. So there's some of the key observations.
And what positions are in demand right now then?
It's swung in roundabouts. Initially, and quite understandably, there was a big demand in April and May when COVID hit us for credit controllers, where businesses strive to get their debtors under control. This quickly moved into compliance-focused roles. With all of the additional requirements from a statutory point of view and tax and so on, there was compliance focus there. When companies were hiring, the other observation was, and this might address some of the reasons why people are getting frustrated with the market, but the hiring company is looking for an exact match to the brief, as opposed to being a little bit open-minded and taking on board people who will grow into a role. And this is partly because the work-from-home scenario made training and inductions far more challenging. And for many hiring managers, this was the first time to work remotely in their careers. So there was a lack of confidence. That's turned around now quite substantially, but definitely it's an exact match, whether it's through a recruiter, whether a company's using a third party like ourselves, or whether they're hiring directly. Leanne, you're asking about the change of industries. Frustratingly so, many of the requests we get are for an industry overlap. So when I reference property as one of the in-demand sectors, just about every property finance role that I recruit, there is a request that they have worked in that part of the sector previously. The other big demand area, coming back to positions in demand, has been payroll. There's barely been a week throughout the whole COVID period where somebody in New South Wales in our office is not recruiting payroll. And we see this skills shortage set to continue. There's been less investment in training up of fresh payroll people. So that's one area. The ones that have been in less demand have been the accounts payable and also analyses and business transformation roles. It's really felt like in New South Wales, in accounting and finance, that business transformation projects were largely put on hold while they refocused and pivoted their workforce to focus on business critical areas. So hopefully that's an area that will create more contract roles in 2021 as businesses look back and say, well, we wanted to do this transformation last year and we didn't. We're going to do it this year and we will need more support throughout our teams.
And what about insights on salaries then?
Yes, the very emotional area of salaries.
From Paulette, she's saying that what about younger employees, and there's a comment about a rebate for hiring younger employees. I've got to say, Paulette, in our office there's been no request.
Yeah, absolutely none.
Not even on the radar about the subsidy or anything like that. It may be different because we are a recruitment agency that looks for specific skills, so they come to us. So it's not even on the radar for us at all. But Kirsten, do you have any other insight on salaries?
Yes, look, salaries have remained static. Candidates are still hoping that or job seekers with a career move or a career change to a new position, they will get a bump up. But across the board, of those companies that are planning to pay salary increases, it is really going to be in line with CPI in that 1 to 3%. the page there shows you some data we collected back in February compared to the data we collected in August, if I recall correctly. So in February, 30% of our audience was planning to pay 4% and above, and come August, that dropped to 4%. And you can see the other reflections there. And similarly with bonuses, whilst the numbers don't look too daunting there, 50-50 split with bonuses, yes and no, it would be really fair to say that the companies that said they were paying bonuses in 2020 did so in the first calendar quarter, and those bonuses were paid very much on 2019 results. So, you know, fast forward to next year, I think there will be also a hold on bonuses for a lot of companies there.
Okay, excellent. And any job search tips for 20?
Yeah, and I think we could do a whole webinar on that, particularly based on the questions here. But the first thing I'm going to say is be patient. One of them, aside from the fact there are less jobs out there at the moment, the less people moving jobs, so creating less opportunities. Patience is required. The decision-making process has been very drawn out. Hiring companies are looking for a genuine skill match to their vacancy, and they're taking their time. So I'm saying to anyone who wants to have a chat about the tactics to use a variety of avenues in your search. Network with relevant recruiters. Apply to advertisements directly. It kills me to say, but when you do apply, and I think there was a comment here about not hearing back and whatnot when you feel your skills are a match, I tell anyone, apply for a job online, then within 24 hours, not immediately, because your resume won't have been reviewed, pick up the phone and try and speak to the either the talent acquisition person, if it's internal, or the recruiter. A day or so later is a reasonable time to have expected someone to have reviewed your experience and see if it's relevant. I also do always say applying for a job is a full-time job, and Dragon, if you're out of work, as you've noted, it does take time and it can be demoralising. Make sure your online professional profiles are current and they reflect your resume, and engage on various forms of social media with companies and or people who you believe you have a skills overlap or your experience overlaps with that business. One of my colleagues mentioned to me and reminded me earlier today that if you're in the more senior space in accounting and finance particularly, but connecting with your auditors. Auditors have their ear to lots of different companies. And often a business might contact their auditor to say, out of interest, do you know anyone who might be interested in this role? So what I guess I'm saying is be a little bit creative. It's not just applying for a job and waiting for someone to reply to you. Target sectors you're interested in. Engage with business pages on, say, LinkedIn. Comment on them. You will then draw the attention of talent acquisition teams. They're often the people who do put company-wide posts up. So if you engage and comment, then you can take that conversation offline and maybe able to create an avenue there. Referrals are also very powerful. So stay connected with previous colleagues, both people you might have reported to, but also if you've had people in your teams, their career could have continued to tick along. So if you network with them, that is another way of being referred to a role. And I get quite a few referrals. I've had a great candidate this week refer me one of her former colleagues, ironically, for a role she's going for as well. So if you take that consultative approach to your applications, you'll have a better chance in what I do acknowledge is a tough and very, very competitive market on the talent side.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kirsten.
My pleasure.
Employee number one. It's great
Makes me sound old.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the webinar today. So fabulous. All right, let's move on, and we'll move to Jamie Taylor, who is from our Western Sydney team, and he's going to give us an update on the business support and supply chain and ops. Let me tell you about Jamie, though. So Jamie is a Novocastrian. So, well, you graduated, I don't know if that is 100% true, but I know you graduated from the University of Newcastle in 2014 with a Bachelor of Business majoring in Human Resource Management. And you had some experience prior with in the not-for-profit sector. assisting those with disadvantaged job seekers, I think. And then since joining People to People at the beginning of 2018, you've been focusing on matching and the best supply chain and operations talent with the right opportunity. So Jamie is passionate about helping people find the right opportunity and partnering with businesses to help them grow by finding the best candidates. Good afternoon, Jamie. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I guess to start off, like in regards to the business support market, it's been a pretty turbulent year from our experience. So the year started off pretty steady. Around the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a significant drop in job vacancies, like Kirsten had mentioned, specifically across like sales, administration, HR. We saw some redundancies as well, unfortunately. Some of the key themes since the beginning of the pandemic have really been around the transition of employees working remotely, which has been a massive shift for a lot of people and a big adjustment. We've sort of started to see businesses return back to the office, thankfully, and as part of that, we've seen some teams specifically across like customer service, call centres who are doing split shifts, for example, which is a way to try and manage those numbers in the office at the same time. Over the last couple of months, we've really seen a stronger demand in regards to sales positions, human resources, talent acquisition. It's all started to come back, which is a good sign that there's a lot more confidence in the market. And from what we've experienced, customer service has been pretty steady across the last 6 to 12 months. Specifically, I mean, around the beginning of the pandemic, there were a few businesses that basically went ballistic in terms of their orders, speaking about like online operators, for example. So we've basically had to, rustle together as many people as we could to resource for some of those businesses. In regards to the salaries across business support, it's been pretty static, like Kirsten had mentioned. So there's really not been much change aside from a few clients that we work with who have really offered pretty modest salary increases, just in line with the CPI. But I know that, like I mentioned, confidence is really starting to return to the market and the economy, and I know that we're really looking for a lot of good people at the moment in that business support space. So, please get in touch with any of us at People if that's what you're looking for. And Remy, if you could maybe just flick over to the supply chain slide, please. Thank you. So it's been a pretty, stable year, actually. I think specifically speaking for supply chain. So I know that operationally, it's a lot of supply chains have really been left exposed and stretched. So, I mean, with all of the complications about bringing things in from overseas and exporting goods, it's really made it quite complicated, but businesses have continued to operate. And like I mentioned before, with around the beginning of the pandemic, with all the panic buying, for example, forecasting, planning, none of that would have predicted all of that, I guess. So there's still been a lot of demand for people in those operational roles, like, for example, like warehousing, support, coordination. Those sort of roles have been pretty stable over the last 6+ months. Where we've seen a bit of a decline, unfortunately, is really around those strategic leadership positions, but thankfully we're starting to see some of that come back now. And I think where we've seen most of the demand from a supply chain perspective, like the industries that have really flourished, is anything around like the medical consumables, for example, like your hand sanitizer, even like food and beverage, consumer goods. Yeah, we've seen a massive. It's been a big year for anyone in that space, and even like the medical device industry, where we do a lot of work. It's really sort of started to come back the last few months as hospitals have started doing elective surgeries again. So similar with the salaries, pretty static though, unfortunately, and I don't think there's much forecast change in that space in the foreseeable future. But we do have a lot of vacancies in supply chain at the moment, specifically within those operational roles. So warehousing, production, that's where we're really seeing a lot of demand still. So if you're looking for a role in that space in particular, please don't don't hesitate to get in.
Fantastic. All right, I can see there's lots of conversation happening during our conversation here about supply chain and business support. Hopefully we'll get to those at the end. I am conscious of time. We've been 50 minutes, so we're close to time. So thank you, Jamie. Lots of information there again. I think if you could just pop up that table there, Remy, for me from that we have there. Just this is a bit of an idea of the salary tables that are in the P2P post that you will get. So you can see the median salary, including super or KiwiSaver across all of the different locations that we operate in there. So for example, you can see in the middle there, demand planner, and then the salary that you could expect in Adelaide, Brisbane, Melbourne, Perth, Sydney, Auckland, and Wellington. So grab a hold of the copy later or after the presentation here today. But let's move on to Anthony DeMarco from our Sydney team. Now, if Jamie was a Novocastrian, I don't even know what you call people born and brought up in Sydney's northern beaches. But Anthony joined people. That's where Anthony's from, and he joined People to People in October 2017 as a consultant on the legal support desk. He comes from a background of sales and recruitment with over 4 years' experience in the field. So his portfolio ranges from boutique law firms to global top tiers and everything else in between. He prides himself on building professional client and candidate relationships and providing an excellent service. So good afternoon, Anthony. Are you there, Anthony? There he is, right in the middle of the Sydney office, and I can even see Olivia sitting behind you, but let's not get her involved. So you're going to talk to us about legal support and just the shockwaves of COVID in those industries, I suppose. So what trends are you seeing in the legal market at the moment?
I am, yes. So in the legal market, I guess one of the big things that we saw firms start to recruit for, especially in Sydney, but also across Australia, was interestingly enough within their IT and marketing teams. So there was a number of positions we were working on here where firms were looking to grow and add to their marketing and business development teams to really drive activity and growth now, but also as we come out of the pandemic, but also looking to add to their IT teams. There's been a number of firms who are looking to add on-site IT help desk staff, and that's really just to sort of with the prediction that they'll have more people working from home on more of an ongoing basis, so they have that support on the ground there to really support their staff who are in the office but also working from home. In terms of, I guess, sort of the moods within the legal market, I mean, it was very quiet across, April, May. We did see a lot of firms move to a work from home structure. The ones that we did see remain in the office were those boutique firms. So that's where we saw a lot of the recruitment activity earlier in the year was within the boutique firms. A lot of the mid to top tiers did put hiring freezes on. So as we've sort of come out of that, and I'd say, especially over the last 2 months, we've seen those hiring freezes be lifted, and we're really seeing a lot of recruitment activity for support staff, so paralegals, secretaries, legal assistants across boutique up to the global firms as well. So permanents remain pretty strong throughout this time, but we're really seeing sort of temp become quite busy over the past couple of weeks. Bit of a mad rush to the end of the year, getting things and projects finished before Christmas time. But we are definitely seeing time to fill positions within the legal industry increase, and that is largely down to job seeker hesitancy, which we'll touch on a little bit later.
Okay, and what areas of law have been positively affected, do you think?
Yeah, it's really interesting within legal to see peaks and troughs within different areas, depending on how the economy is doing. So commercial litigation and disputes resolution has been consistently strong among every firm that we speak with. Surprisingly, property and planning has remained relatively strong. Insurance litigation, so both on the defendant and plaintiff firms, have been really, really busy. Certainly for the team here in Sydney, I'd say the majority of positions that we were recruiting during the pandemic were within the insurance space. But we are also seeing, employment law was extremely busy, and that has come in sort of waves. construction extremely busy, and family law starting to get busier now as we come through the pandemic.
Yeah, I was really interested. Property and construction was such a surprise for me during this downturn. What about the current trend for fee earner to support ratio? Is there anything?
Yeah, look, I think it can vary depending on the firm and the area of law as well. So we tend to see, family law, plaintiff insurance, those sort of areas, the ratios be a little bit lower than the average, but the vast majority of firms are sitting at a 1-to-4 ratio. So 1 secretary, 1 assistant to 4 lawyers. Depending on, as I said, the size of the firm, those do sometimes go beyond and greater than the 1-to-5. And I think what we're hearing from most firms is that as the junior lawyers start to progress through, they are a little bit more self-sufficient. So those ratios will start to grow, and the role of a legal assistant or a secretary will start to develop. So they'll take on different duties, but also take on more lawyers that they'll be looking after.
And what about salary review? What are you seeing this year in legal support?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting one. It's been a pretty even split in terms of what firms have been doing. So 41% actually postponed their reviews, and a lot are actually starting to pick them back up now and as we come into the new year. So I guess one of the biggest trends that we've seen with firms, and from when we've been speaking to them over the past couple of months, is that they are doing quite well. So they do want to go back and really review those salaries for their staff. Initially 29%, so nearly 1 in 3 said we're not going to do them this year. We're just going to scrap them to next year and pick them back up in July next year. And then 30% still did theirs at the usual time, but we weren't seeing big increases in salaries like we were in previous years. So yes, the review did go ahead, but the increases weren't very big.
And what about benefits? Any benefits?
Yeah, so look, I think the benefits will start to change over time. The biggest benefits that we see with law firms, as you'll see just on the left here, are drinks, lunches, dinners. Now, during a pandemic where we had everyone working from home, those benefits weren't applicable to staff, but also cab charges home and paid overtime. Those cab charges weren't being used because people were predominantly working at home. Flexible working arrangements at 74%. I think that will start to be seen within firms a little bit more of a given opposed to a benefit. And we are seeing more firms start to really look at their work from home policies. I think for the most part, and I was reading a Lawyers Weekly article just the other day from a managing partner within a top tier firm saying, look, for the most part, our staff will be in more often than not, but we will be offering flexible working. So I think, look, with law firms, they will be offering maybe 1 or 2 days working from home per week, but for the majority of the week, you will be in the office. Learning development programs, health and wellbeing, and there's a number of others listed there. I think the most surprising one for me, sitting at 5%, is paternity leave. So time off for the care of.
Well, hey, we support New Zealand Top Dog, so I'm not going to go with paternity leave.
Absolutely. Well, it's 5 years ago that wouldn't have been on there, but it's interesting to see how the benefits are developing as the years go on. So. Yeah, that's some of the benefits that legal support staff are receiving, and obviously our salary table split across the different cities and the different positions that we recruit in.
Fantastic. Rightio. Well, thanks, Anthony. That was brilliant. So we've got a grand total of 3 minutes, so not a lot of time to answer questions. There was one question from Joe Hill at the beginning for Kirsty in New Zealand, which if there's any areas any industries that are doing better than others in New Zealand. I'm not sure if we're going to get to that one now, Joe Hill. So I'll make sure that I connect you or we pop Kirsty's details in the comments there so you can ask her directly or she can get in touch with you. I'll just do a quick call out now if there's any other questions that anybody would have for our presenters here. I can see James has just said his age is still a factor in finding a suitable role. My view on that is that if you'd asked me that, and I've been in the industry 24 years, it was certainly a factor. It hasn't disappeared. Certainly a factor a few years ago. I'm talking 10, 15 years ago. Now, though, it is less of an issue. I know that in Anthony's team, we placed somebody into a reception role who was in her late 60s only just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, correct.
It's not. It's certainly less of an issue than it was, say, 10, 15 years ago, or even longer than that. So, but look, don't get me wrong there, James. It still certainly exists. It's not something that's disappeared. It's like discrimination. It's certainly out there, but it wasn't. It's not the big issue that we had before. Rightio. Well, that's it, everybody. I think we've been online now for an hour. Plenty of information available in the P2P post. We will now pop a link into the comments where you can download the P2P post and get a hold of all of that information, including the salary details. We'll also follow up with this recording and a link to the post there. But thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's been a pleasure working with you during this year, and hopefully this is just a little something that we can give back to those who have partnered with us during that time. So thanks, everybody, and enjoy Christmas. Hopefully we'll see you again on the webinars next year.